Welcome to Horticulture and Homes. Today I'm going to be canning some pickles, and these are going to be a watermelon rind pickle. I haven't made these in years, and I've been wanting to make them. About 7 or 8 years ago I wanted to make these, and it was difficult to find a watermelon with a rind that was thick enough to actually make these pickles, because the watermelons have been hybridized so much that there's very little rind left compared to the way it used to be years ago. And you'll notice a little bit of pink here that shows, and this is not soft, but there is a pink tinge to some of these pieces, and there's really no way to get around that. This was 2 round striped watermelons that I used to get enough of the rind. So, you know, that was, first off, that was a big difference that I noticed from when I used to make these in the past. And I had been, you know, it's been a long time since I've seen a watermelon rind that I thought was thick enough where I could actually make the pickles. And anyway, I was able to find something this year. So I've got my chunks already cut up, and the watermelon had been sliced into I don't know, strips about 2.5, 3 inches wide. And once the meat was removed, then I went in and I took that width of watermelon rind and I just slit it with a long paring knife so that I had, you know, 2 pieces, a width of 2 pieces. So then I just split that in half, and then it was easy with a paring knife to take off that rind on strips that were this wide, and then I chunked it up, and they need to be into about 1-inch pieces. This has been soaking overnight in salted water, and I took a half gallon of boiling water and dissolved a cup of, you can either dissolve a cup of canning salt or a cup of kosher salt. Then you need to refrigerate that and have a gallon of cold water, including that salted water. So you need a gallon of that salted water that's been mixed with a cup of salt. You don't want to use table salt. You don't want that iodized salt. That will could turn your pickle a little cloudy. So you want to stay away from that. So these have been soaking. Now I have to drain them and rinse them. And then I'll come back and talk about the recipe as soon as I get done draining and rinsing these, because these need to stand in clear water for a little bit. Alright, I have drained my watermelon rind, and I have it soaking in just some plain water for a little bit. I brined it a little longer than I should have. I had some unexpected company twice today. So instead of doing these pickles in the morning, I'm making them this evening. The reason that you're brining that is to draw some of that moisture out of that watermelon rind. And you want that nice briny salty, because you're going to mix the sweet, that sugar and spices with that. So the pickle is a, you know, it's a salty, vinegar, sweet kind of a pickle. And the recipe that I'm using today is in the Ball Blue book, and they change recipes around. So this is copyright 1982, the 30th edition of the Ball Blue book. It's in that on page 32, and that's the recipe that I'm going by today. There's also a recipe for them in a newer version. This is the 32nd edition. That was copyright 1990 of the Ball Blue book. That looks like this. Almost the identical recipe is also in here. So that's where you can find the recipe. There's also similar recipes in a couple other books. The Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving The recipe for the watermelon rind pickles is different. It's not the recipe from this book. So I'm pulling it from old editions of the blue book, not the big home preserving book. Now there are also similar recipes for the same type of pickle. And this is a copy of The Farmer's Wife Canning and Preserving Cookbook. And this was printed. These are actually old recipes, most of them that have been reprinted actually. Okay, this has a copyright of 2009 on this book. And there's also a recipe that's similar in this book. It's Canning for a New Generation by Leanna Krisoff. And this was published in 2010. So I'm sure there's other recipes out there also where you could find it, but I like the recipe from the Ball Blue Book. It's one I've used for a long time, so that's what I'm going to do again today. And the recipe calls for vinegar, and I'm using white vinegar because that's the way I originally made it. That's the way this recipe, what it was designed for originally. It's an old recipe, a good way to use the whole product of the watermelon, and they're good pickles. So I will get out the ingredients that I need. I have my canning jars getting hot right now, and get the rest of the stuff prepped and be right back. Okay, I've rinsed my watermelon rind, and I've gone ahead and put that into a stock pot, covered it with water. I'm going to put this on the stove and bring this to a low boil, and I'm going to cook this for approximately 20 minutes, 20-30 minutes. You want the watermelon rind to be tender all the way through. And right now, if you were to take a bite, this rind is very salty, and that's what it's supposed to be, so don't worry about that. So I'll get this cooking. Alright, my watermelon rind has cooked, and I drained it. It's now nice and tender. It's also translucent looking. Okay, and that's drained. And then into the same kettle that I cooked my watermelon rind, I'm going to put my brine. We'll cook the brine for a little while and then add the watermelon rind back to it. Alright, let's talk about the spices that go into the pickle. The recipe calls for whole allspice, whole cloves, cinnamon stick, and mustard seed. And I have this in my little tea strainer here. This is a large tea strainer. It's stainless steel. Some of you have asked me where I picked it up. I picked this up in a kitchen shop, and I have seen these online. If you just type in mesh tea ball or tea strainer, that kind of a thing, you can find this. I've used this for years and years. But I know they do still exist because I found them online last year. So I've gone ahead and put that in here. The recipe instructions say to go ahead and put that into a piece of cheesecloth and tie that up. Make yourself a little bag and tie that up. I think cheesecloth is expensive, and a lot of the cheesecloth that you find today is not woven very fine, so it takes a lot of layers to be able to get those whole spices, especially that mustard seed, to stay in there without falling out and falling through the mesh of that cheesecloth. Another thing you can do is you can make yourself a little tie bag, or this came from the craft shop, from the wedding section. This one happens to have a print on it. If you find something like this, you'll probably want to wash it ahead of time. Make sure that's color fast and isn't going to fade into what you're doing. Or if you can find just some kind of a plain bag, or make yourself a bag. The other thing you could do is go pick up a 1/4 yard of muslin or 1/8 of a yard of muslin and cut that into sections and make your bag out of that. That will work really well. I have my lemon, and it's sliced thinly. I wound up with a few slices. I didn't put the ends in here. I don't like that because there's a lot of the white pith. And then I had this whole slice that was nothing but peel and pith. I don't want that in my pickle. That's bitter. So this is ready to go. And I'm not going to give you the exact amounts because the recipe is copyrighted, and I gave you other sources where you can find it. I also checked online. There are lots of recipes for watermelon rind pickles, and the amount of sugar to vinegar ratio and the kind of vinegar, and I mean it's a whole gamut. There are all types of recipes out there. As far as canning, I did find one recipe that was probably a decent source to use for canning. But it was not a USDA website, and it was not, anything from Ball. So, you're kind of on your own there. It's up to you what you want to do. Just make sure you're safe when you're doing that, and your acid and sugar ratios are what they need to be for home preservation. And if you're not sure, go to that Ball Blue Book or the USDA. And I gave you several other sources that have recipes that are just for home canning. But you may decide you want to try this pickle and just make a batch and keep in your refrigerator. You might want to do that too, and that's fine. You don't have to worry about canning it. So I'm going to take my spice bag and hook that onto the side of my pot. I'm going to add my lemon, my sugar. And I'm making 1 1/4 recipes because I had enough watermelon rind between those 2 watermelons. 1 was not enough to make a complete recipe. So what I did is just increase my ingredients, my salt and water as far as brining my watermelon rind. I didn't need to change anything with that, but as far as these ingredients going in here to make the rest of the pickle, all I did was increase the amounts by 1.25 to get that. That's very easy math, easy to do. Okay, this goes on the stove, and I need to get this sugar dissolved and cook this together for approximately 10 minutes, and then I'll add my watermelon rind back to this mixture. Okay, begin to stir this. As it begins to boil, you have to stir it, make sure that it doesn't stick or start to burn anywhere. You'll get some crystals along the edge, and I like to keep those wiped down. Okay, so this is beginning to boil, and I need to let this go for 10 minutes. So I've got my little timer here. And while this is cooking this way, I just wanted to point out I have my lids and rings over here at a simmer as low as they'll go on my stove. I have my jars, my tongs, my funnel, my ladle, whatever tool, if you use a chopstick or whatever. I've got the little plastic tool to run down the sides to get rid of the bubbles. I put everything in that water to make sure everything is sanitized really well. So that's going. And I'll have to stay here and stir this while it cooks. I'm going to have to turn it down a little bit. It's a little bit too much of a boil. You don't want to boil too much of your pickling liquid away. So I want a nice rolling boil. Okay, now you can see the sugar has just dissolved. This was cloudy before. The sugar's finally just dissolved. I've got a nice clear liquid and good bubbles here. Alright, it's been 10 minutes that this has been boiling. So I get this smell of vinegar. I can smell the lemon. I can smell the allspice and those cloves. And I've got this nice clear sugar syrup. Okay, now it's time to add the watermelon rind back to the pot. I'll continue to cook this. I need to turn this down just a little. But I'll continue to cook this until the watermelon rind actually turns more transparent and it's cooked all the way through. Now, some people like to add food coloring. If you want to add a little green food coloring to this, you can. I usually don't do that. It's not something I need to do, and I'd use something that's a natural organic type product anyway. And that I mentioned earlier that some of this rind had this pink tinge to it. Still looks like some of the meat of the watermelon, but that is, hard. It feels like the rind. It's just the color just continues through a bit. But you do want to make sure you cut out all that soft pink tissue if you can. This, it really depends on the pollination and the hybridization of the watermelon because things have changed so much over the years. Okay, that'll come back up to the boil, and I'll keep that at a low boil. Alright, I just pulled my pickles off of the stove. You can see these look pretty translucent. And some of them still look white. They're translucent around the edge, but once you pull those up in just a minute, you can see how that goes translucent. So these are ready to go. Okay, I went ahead and took a small strainer and put that into my water bath to sterilize that. Because I'm going to use that, I need to put my pickles, the rind, into the jar, and then I'll add the brine to it, or the syrup to it. And this is so hot, this jar will stay really hot. I don't have to add the syrup right away. I'll do a couple jars before I go and add the syrup. We want to leave 1/4 of an inch headspace on this. Alright, once my jar is filled, I've got my head spacing correct at 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to take a wet paper towel. I'm going to run that around the rim to make sure there's not anything that's going to come in contact with that seal to prevent the jar from sealing. And every time I wipe a new jar, I try and use a different place on my paper towel. Now I have to get a lid and ring. Before I put this in this goes into a water bath canner. Just wanted to show you just how, whoop, here we go. See how pretty this is? I'll just continue filling my jars until I have everything in here. And make sure that I have at least 1 or 2 slices of lemon in each jar. So once I get this done, I'll be right back. I just wanted to point it out, since this is actually in a syrup, I try and make sure that when I'm canning anything that's in that's a syrup or pickle, brine, or whatever, that I have enough liquid covering whatever that pickle or whatever it is, that watermelon rind, so that all I have on the top, very top, is nothing but the syrup. And that way, over time, as it sits on the shelf, if any of a fruit or any vegetable or whatever, anything that's exposed will oxidize a little bit and darken, and that's going to prevent that from happening. Okay, I have all my jars in my canner, and then I need to add some water. I want the jars to be covered in at least an inch of water. I like to go 2 inches if I can. Okay, I have one jar that just went over. Not a big deal. I can just set that right back up. Okay, I'll add a little bit more water. Then I'm going to turn this on. Everything is nice and hot. I've got my temperature correct. I'll then place my lid on, turn this up on high, and bring it to a boil. And once I bring it to a full rolling boil, I'll process this for 10 minutes. Now, remember I told you I made enough for 1 1/4 batches. And a single batch was supposed to make 6 pints, and it's been a long time since I've been able to make these pickles. And I wound up with 6 pints total, and this should have made a bit more. And it came out 6 pints perfectly between my syrup and my watermelon rind. Not quite sure what the deal is on that. I don't have tight packing as far as my rind's concerned in my jar. In fact, there's a fair bit of syrup in there. So, you know, that's the way it came out. I've got 6 pints, so I'll finish filling this. So I'm going to turn this up on high now. I've kept it on a medium heat so I could keep that nice low simmer, keeping everything good and hot. Okay, we'll come back when it's boiling. Okay, my canner is going at a full rolling boil. So I'll set my timer for 10 minutes and process. Okay, our 10-minute processing time has elapsed. And I can open the canner. Make sure I open that away from me so that steam doesn't smack me in the face. Okay, now that I've got those up, I'm going to place this on the counter behind me on that towel I was using earlier. These will sit on the counter overnight until they cool and they seal. I place them on a towel because that countertop can be cool, and it's, you know, it's very, very hot jar, and I don't want the hot and cold to come in contact and maybe crack my jar. Now, if you have a Formica countertop, you'll want to use a towel just as for insulation so that you don't damage your countertop. Now, the next thing you'll be asking me, oh, that one's sealing as I'm taking it out. Okay, you're going to be asking me, okay, what does it taste like? And I don't want to open a jar of these at the moment because I have some onion relish and other things similar to this already open. So I thought I would take a taste of the syrup and try and explain it to you. Okay, the first thing you taste is the sweet, that syrup that coats your tongue in that sweet. And then in the back of your throat, you get the hit of that twang and that tartness of the vinegar and the lemon. And then as kind of background notes, you can taste the allspice and those cloves. Another thing you might ask is, okay, what do you use it for? I like to use it with any type of meat that has been roasted. It would be excellent with a pork roast. It would be great with a roast chicken. Any of you that can your own meats, where you just can it in its own broth or with water. You know, if you didn't have other things around and you had that canned meat, this would really make that taste a lot better instead of eating it, you know, straight out of the jar, just heating it up. The other thing that I think tastes good is to, instead of using pickle relish, to chop this up and put it in your chicken salad or turkey salad, and that's very good. And one of the things that my daughter likes to do with, well, she does this with turkey also. She'll take a roast turkey and make a sandwich and put cranberry sauce on her sandwich instead of putting any mayonnaise or anything like that on it. So this would also be good if you had a sandwich of roast pork or chicken or something like that, is to put this on there. That will, you know, kind of wet and moisten the meat down, not make it so dry, and also give you that sweet, tangy, salty along with that meat. And that's something that, you know, we tend to like, and it's another thing that's used in Asian cooking oftentimes. You get the sweet, salty, and the sour. And then, you know, to go one more note, if you like it spicy, you can add that hot pepper or that spice to it, and that's, you know, we tend to really like those types of flavors. So there's some ideas for you. If you happen to make this and you have other uses or other, you know, interesting ways you like to use it, let me know. And I'll give you a little picture of this tomorrow once I remove the rings and wash the jars. Alright, here's our finished product of the watermelon rind pickle. Just wanted to show you how pretty this turned out. Got that nice thick syrup. You see that watermelon rind is translucent. It's sweet and tangy with a little bit of spice. So I'll get these put on the pantry shelf, and then next time I eat watermelon, I may actually make another batch of these. I've got a different recipe I'm going to try that has some ginger in there, and I think that would be really good. So until next time.